Good morning, and once again welcome to social work and mental health subject. This is week 5 and it's 10 minutes with Abraham. This week we are trying to understand the medical model for practice. So what's the key idea that we are trying to explore this week? The key idea from this unit is to consider the range of levels you may engage within your role as a social worker. And of course, after completing this subject, from this unit, we expect that the students will get a good understanding about the medical model and especially gain an overview of the mental health disorders. And the subject study guide for this week provides you with those things in very detail. I have also provided you with some links from where you can access more information related to those mental disorders. Be familiar with the spectrum of responses in mental health social work. That's another objective for this week. Have an understanding of the alternative ways of engaging with people affected by mental health issues. These are practice issues, and be able to reflect on examples of practice. And I have given you some reflective questions at the end of the study unit, so I would really request all of you to look at some of those questions for your own reflections. So the key idea is to understand the medical model, and we expect our students to get a fairly good understanding about some of the practice issues, some of the responses in the mental health field from a social work perspective. And we might ask a question: why do we need to understand all these medical terms? A working knowledge of the system of classification of disorders is useful to all social workers and essential to those working in mental health service. Social workers share the task of assessment and preliminary diagnosis, so it's important for all social workers to understand basic approach to classification of mental health disorders and to recognize the signs and symptoms of the most common disorders. So therefore it's very important that we understand the language. We are able to have a good conversation in a multidisciplinary team. So therefore we ask our students to really understand this. And just drawing from the literature, in this unit we have used the language of psychiatry, not the language of social work. But to work in this field effectively, it is a language that social workers need to understand and able to use. So it's from your textbook, page number 104, where Bland and his team talks about the importance of understanding this language and how effectively and efficiently we can use this in our conversations. So therefore it is important for us to understand what is a medical model then. It is a way of understanding and organizing symptoms and signs into the categories, disease, disorders and syndromes. The principal purpose is to determine and prescribe the appropriate treatment, and that's the reason why this model is used. And I have given lots of links. Two important documents that you need to refer to is ICD-10 and the DSM-5. So I have already uploaded a lecture by one of my colleagues, Dr. Beryl Buckby, who is actually talking about DSM-5, the changes in DSM-5. So please listen to that. Now, what do you really need to do now? So I would ask you to read the required text, especially that particular assessment chapter, and looking at the medical models. Please refer to the following site to gain an understanding of the various disorders. That's the site that I have already uploaded. That's Mental Illness Fellowship Australia website. So please have a look at those things and look at the fact sheets. These fact sheets are easy to read and understand. Practice is very practical, short and information rich. They also cross-refer to allied mental illness conditions and treatments and provide you valuable information and sources and resources and useful contacts. So you can download all of them from that website. So in terms of looking at the DSM-5, the primary purpose of the DSM-5 is to provide clinicians and researchers with a common language for research and for the treatment of people with mental disorders, and social workers in mental health settings need to be familiar with this content and structure. That's very important. So we get a common language, we understand the mental disorders, and we are able to provide a service and able to have conversations around this in a multidisciplinary team. So DSM provides a description of each of the clinical syndromes with a list of signs and symptoms to be considered and the criteria in terms of severity and duration under which a diagnosis might be made. So I'm only giving you a snapshot of what has been discussed this week. So just to summarize, I want you to look at the objective of understanding this week's readings, how that is related to the subject learning outcomes, the goals for this unit, and what are the resources that are provided to you so that you are able to get those informations. Two important things, DSM-5 and ICD-10 that you need to look at, and look at the mental health disorders that you can download from the website, and also read from your subject study guide where these points have been elaborated further. So once that is done, I would ask you now to reflect on these three important questions. What are some of the benefits of working in a multidisciplinary team when considering an appropriate and client-centered response to mental health issues? So the question is, how am I going to work in a multidisciplinary team? What are the advantages? So think about that. Number two, what might be some of the challenges? How might you continue to advocate for a socio-contextual understanding of mental health if you are to be employed as the only social worker in a mental health service? And especially this happens in a very rural and remote context where you are the only social worker, so there's so much of responsibility, so much of work to be done, and what are some of the challenges you might face there? So think about that. The third question is, why do you think that an understanding of medical model is important for practice? And I think this is a very important question for all the students to think very critically and to see why we really need to have an understanding of this medical model. I have heard from some students saying, that I am a social work student, I don't diagnose, I don't do this, but why do I really need to learn and need to understand this? So I think that point is made very clear in the discussions today, that we are while social workers are trying to enter into a workplace and work in a multidisciplinary team, it's important that we get that language, we understand the language, and so we are able to better work within a multidisciplinary team and provide a great service to our client. So I would ask you to reflect on these questions, and again read the subject study guide notes, the links that have been provided, and I think you will definitely capture the essence of what I have been trying to share with you this week. This is in a nutshell, and I thought to share these ideas with you. So please log on to LearnJSU website, share your ideas, and I know you have been engaging. Some of you have been very proactive in responding to some of the questions. I request all of you to really join and share your ideas, because if you don't engage, you're not really going to learn. So once again, I wish you all the best, and request you all to come to LearnJSU and start sharing your ideas. See you next week, and I hope you're all getting ready to submit your final assignments. Some of you have already submitted it. Tomorrow is the due date, and it should be submitted by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So with that note, I stop here. I'll catch up with you all next week. Thank you. Bye for now.